Today is March 11th, and I'm interviewing Frances Birkmose of Hudson, Wisconsin, and I'm interviewing her at the Hudson Library. What is your full name?
Frances Marilyn Birkmose.
Okay, and when were you born, Frances?
I was born in Hudson in 1921.
Were you born in a house or at a hospital?
No, I was born in a house, which was done quite frequently at that time.
Where did you live when you were born?
Where I live now at 1324 2nd Street.
You've lived there your whole life?
Well, I was away for about 7 years. I lived in Denver, Colorado. Outside of that, I've lived in that house all the time. I came back from Denver because my folks were getting older, and then I just stayed in the house after they died.
What were you doing out in Denver?
Oh, I worked for attorneys in Denver.
For attorneys?
Mm-hmm.
What were your parents' names?
Well, my mother's maiden name was Johnson. Her name was Lillian Johnson, and my dad was Rudolph Birkmose.
What were they like as parents? Were they strict?
Well, they were quite strict. My father was quite strict. Children now I think, are quite spoiled compared to how things were. If my father said something, that's exactly what you did. But he wasn't mean, but he was the head of the household.
What was your mother like? Was she in charge of all the house activities that went on?
Yes, at that time, most women didn't work. If they stayed home and took care of the house and the children. So she had her regular schedule. Like she did the washing on Mondays and she did baking on Tuesdays, and everything had its own place. Her day every day was scheduled.
Did you have chores that you had to do?
We didn't do too many chores. My mother thought we got in the way, so she wasn't too crazy about us doing things. So we didn't do a lot of housework, and of course that was fine with us.
Yeah. You said you had a sister? Did you have other siblings?
I had a brother.
You did. And what were their names?
My sister's name was Mildred Harden. And my brother's name was Chester Birkmose.
Can you describe what a normal day was like?
During the school year, there were no buses, no school buses. Children from the country, they went to country school, but when we got into high school, they had to drive their own cars in, and they usually carpooled and came in that way. But there were no buses, so you had to walk. And people didn't have cars like they do now. In fact, we didn't have a car. When we got our groceries, we had our groceries delivered. And we used to have to walk downtown to get anything else. So we did a lot of walking.
Did you have your groceries delivered from O'Connell's?
No, from Birkmose's.
Birkmose's?
My dad's uncle owned Birkmose store here.
And where was that located? Do you remember?
Yes, right downtown, just south of where Dibbo Hotel is.
Was that a grocery store?
It was a grocery and dry goods store. And O'Connell's was right across the street. Now, my brother eventually owned O'Connell's. At the time he was killed, he was in the grocery business. He got the store from Dave O'Connell.
Okay, so you got your groceries delivered.
Yes, we got the groceries delivered.
Was that every day?
Well, yes, you could get it. You called in your order and they delivered it. Whenever you wanted the groceries, you called in and they delivered it. Now, there also were other salesmen that came around and sold things like spices and vanilla extracts, and they came to your house too, but not as frequent. You know, they came from other places, and you had more things delivered to your house than you do now.
Did you have electricity in your house, or was that just something you always had?
We had electricity all the time.
Okay.
And we had indoor plumbing all the time.
Okay. Yeah. And you had told me about a refrigerator that you had.
Oh.
That was an ice box.
My brother was a football player, so he He delivered ice for an ice company during the summer, and of course these ice companies delivered ice to people all over for their ice boxes. It came time for us to get a new ice box, and called a Kelvinator, and it looked just like a refrigerator, only you put ice in it, the ice up in the top. But that was about the time the refrigerators were coming in, so we weren't too happy about that, because we could have put a refrigerator
You
in.
could have gotten a new refrigerator
Yeah,
instead of one
yeah.
that looked like a
Yeah,
refrigerator.
but because my brother was delivering the ice, we got the Kelvinators.
Did he work for the ice houses down on the river here on the pond, Lake Malibu?
Yeah, he did. He worked for George Christopher, who was at the far end, who had ice houses down there, and he worked for, there was another one right on the other side of the bridge. It was Bowles at one time, but he didn't work for Bowles. He worked for whoever took over for Bowles afterward. But he was in football, and he did it to keep himself trained during the summer.
Did he play football for Hudson High School?
He did. He was another 4 years older than I was. He was born in 1917, so.
How did you wake up in the morning?
Oh, my mother was our alarm clock.
She was your alarm clock.
She got up very early in the morning, and she got us up, and it wasn't always easy because we were too crazy about getting up. And then we'd get dressed. Fortunately for me, there was a girl who was my age right across the street. So we grew up together. So I'd go over and pick her up, and the two of us would head off for school together.
What school did you go to?
We went up to the 4th Street School, okay. Willow River, and it isn't anymore. And then we went right over to the high school. So the only place we went in Hudson, right in that one block on 4th Street. Mm-hmm.
Oh, so you didn't have to walk far at all.
No, we didn't have to walk far. Of course, Hudson was much smaller than it is now. Hudson was just downtown Hudson. There was nothing up on the hill. And there were farms up where all these businesses are now. Everybody walked to school. You went home for lunch at noon. And the only people who stayed at the school for lunch were people who lived too far away to be able to go home.
What was the name of your friend that lived across the street from you?
Her name was Isabel Anderson, and then she got married. After she got married, her name was Isabel Cronstead.
So you would go home for lunch at noon. Mm-hmm. What would be something that your mom would have food for you for lunch?
Oh, yes.
What would she usually have?
Oh, she'd have things like soup or some hot dish, sandwiches.
What kind of time did you have for lunch? Did you have like a half an hour?
No, I think it was an hour.
And then you went back to school?
Then we had to go back to school. So we'd get out at noon, and then take a few minutes to walk, and then you'd eat, and then you'd have a little time to do whatever you wanted to do. And then you'd be back at school by 1 o'clock.
What was your typical school day like?
Down in the grades, I remember we'd start out the day, and in some classes, it all depended on your teacher. Each teacher had their own schedule. We used to start out by somebody reading a book that everybody liked. The Bobbsey twins were real popular when I was in about 5th and 6th grade, I remember. And every morning we'd start out by somebody reading out of the Bobbsey twin books. So it was light reading, something that was very, very easy. And, I think it just kind of relaxed the class.
Did you have a lot of different subjects during the day?
Oh, yes. The usual ones, reading, writing, arithmetic, mostly. We had music. Edith Hansen was in charge of the vocal music in the Hudson schools for many, many years, all the years I was in school, in fact. She traveled around to the various grades as I remember it, and we'd have some music lessons, but only not every day, maybe only once a week. I don't remember how many days during the week. but we had all the basics.
Did you have foreign languages?
No, not in grade school. In high school, they had foreign languages, but I took Latin. But outside of Latin, I think they only had German.
Do you remember how many children there were in your classrooms?
I've got a picture of our kindergarten class, and I think maybe there's at least 20, about 20, maybe 25 in the class. So it'd be around 25, I imagine, probably more than that. I'm trying to think of the desks and how many there would be and how many there would be. There would be about 1, 2, 3, 4, about at least 5 rows across, maybe 10, maybe 40 in a class, maybe more.
Do you remember your teachers?
Yes, I remember some. Yeah, I remember them.
Who was your favorite? Do you remember your favorite?
Well, my favorite was somebody up in about the 5th or 6th grade. Her name was Elsie Nation, and she was really pretty. But she got married shortly after she became our teacher, so we lost her. Ida Mae Buell taught first grade, and she taught for many years. She had many people in our age had her as a teacher, of course. She was a little old lady, and she lived up on 3rd Street, and she had a sister who worked on her Birkmose, so of course we knew her really well.
How did they dress? Did the female teachers, did they always wear dresses?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, everybody?
No, women didn't wear pants then at all. You know, that in my lifetime, that's a relatively new occurrence. I was working, not too long time ago. We couldn't wear pants to work in an office, and finally they said that we could wear pants, but it had to be part of a suit. It couldn't be just pants. The top had to be the same material and the same color and everything as the bottom. So it had to be now this isn't that many years ago. And a girl working in our office made a pantsuit, and she had brown pants and a top out of various colors, a kind of plaid sort of top. She wore it to work, and they sent her home because it wasn't a set. So that created quite a hubbub. But things were much stricter then. Well, I can remember the time too when electric typewriters were starting to come in. And then they started bringing in these computerized typewriters. There was something called a mag card where you typed on it before computers. Mm-hmm. But it's a computer system. But you typed on this and it printed on a card. They called it a mag card, and before they got where you could type on computers. And you could send it over, you could send your product over a phone line, but you could send it to Washington, for example. Put this card into the phone and it would transmit it to Washington, but they had to know that it was coming, and they had to have a phone that received it. But it was a hard mess, but a very complicated thing. Well, you go over the telephone line, so it would go like a telephone call. Anyhow, to get back to this, when they were starting to bring these new machines in and everything, we all thought that our jobs were going to be taken away from us because it was going to be so computerized that we wouldn't have jobs anymore. We weren't very crazy about some of these new innovations that were coming in.
Was that at the law office you worked at?
That was working for the federal government, for the district council's office of the federal government.
And so you thought your jobs were going to be gone because of those machines.
We thought that they would take the jobs away. Well, of course, that didn't happen. And thankfully, you don't have to type like we had to type.
Did you all eat together at the dinner table for every meal?
Well, my father didn't come home for lunch. He worked for the railroad, and he didn't come home for lunch. And we didn't eat breakfast. My dad left earlier. He ate breakfast first. Sometimes I didn't even eat breakfast sometimes. I went up to school without eating breakfast. But we'd pick up something for breakfast, which wasn't a particularly good thing to do. And then, of course, we'd come home for lunch. And in the evening, we'd have dinner together. But we always had meat and potatoes and gravy, because my father insisted on meat and potatoes and gravy. That consisted of our evening meal. Of course, we didn't have television at that time, but we did have a radio. And I can remember us sitting down and doing our schoolwork in the evening, and our folks let us stay up till 10 o'clock because there was a soap opera on the radio by the name of Merton Marge. Many people used to listen to, so we could stay up and listen to Merton Marge, and then we had to go to bed at night.
Was that on every night, or was that once?
That was on every night.
Was it?
10 o'clock.
What else did you do in the evenings besides listen to the radio? Did you read?
I had a sister who read all the time. Read, and not so much during the school nights, but of course, we used to go out and play outdoors a lot more than children do now. In the summer, all the kids in the neighborhood would get together and we play blind man's bluff and hide and go seek, and we always stay out until the sun went down. And then the folks would start calling, time to come in. So, but all the kids played outdoors. We spent an awful lot of time outdoors playing, even in winter. We were outdoors all the time in winter. We were finding hills to slide down. If we didn't have a sled, we'd slide on cardboard. And across the street from us, we had, back of the houses across the street from where I lived, there were big hills, and then it goes down to a creek, and of course we would be down there all the time. We'd build ski jumps and play around and all the time. So, but of course we didn't have computers, and we'd find our own entertainment. We'd be out all the time during the summer, all day long.
So you said you played blind man's bluff and hide and seek. What other kind of games do you remember playing?
The neighborhood gang one time put on a play in one of the buildings back of somebody's house, and it was called something white, and so they staged this production, and my friend across the street and I were younger than the rest of them. They weren't going to let us be in the play, so the fellow who owned the building were going to have it, and they said, well, if you don't put those girls in the play, we won't let you use the garage or the building. So they let it, she and I said nursery rhymes or something like that. But her grandfather, that was her grandfather stuck up for us. That's what happened a lot in different neighborhoods. The kids would get together and play together. Now, up in our neighborhood, that was true, and I know there was a bunch up in North Hudson, up in East Hudson, that used to do that. And I live on 2nd Street, and down a little bit closer to town, and down 1st Street, there was a gang down there that did the same thing. The kids in the neighborhood would get together and play together. But we didn't have computers, and we didn't have television, and so we'd go and find our own fun. You know, one problem always is where are kids going to hang out? They've got to have some place to go, or they get into trouble. So there was a painter down in River Falls who had something called the Candy Kitchen. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
He had a candy kitchen down in River Falls, and it was kind of a restaurant, and they kind of specialized in sodas and cokes and that sort of thing. So his son, Mike Painter, started the Malted Milk Shop in the Hudson, and it had malted milks and sandwiches, and so that became a big hangout for the kids when I was in high school. All the kids used to hang out down there, and it was really a good place because it no liquor or anything, and it was someplace for the kids to go. You'd go down there and meet your friends down at the Malted Milk Shop. So you'd go in there, and there were always a big bunch of kids there, but it was a good place for the kids to be, so it was a place for them to go.
What kind of things did you do there?
They have booths, you go in and you order Coke and stay for hours. But Mike was real good with children. He liked them. He was a good friend to them. He provided a place for them to go. There was a John Hooley who had a meat market in Hudson. John Hooley was a jokester, and he had this meat market in Hudson for years and years. And my brother went into that grocery store with O'Connell's. So John Hooley got hold of these old advertisements where something cost about $1.50 and was 5 cents, and at night he'd go and plaster them on the windows of my brother's store. So advertising something that had prices for many years, So he was quite a joke. But John Hooley was in business here for many, many years. There again, you'd have to go. There, how many times we'd have to make trips down to pick up meat at Hooley's. You'd come home from school, and my mother would say, "Well, you have to go downtown to get meat." And you used to just hate to have to go down and pick up the meat, walk all the way downtown and walk all the way home.
Oh, because you didn't have a car, so you had to walk the whole way.
We didn't have a car. We walked.
Do you remember when you got a car? Your first car?
We got a car in 1955 after I came back from Denver.
Do you remember what it was?
What kind?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it was a pink and white Crown Victoria. Pink and white seats even.
Do you remember the toll bridge?
Oh, yes, of course. Of course, the toll bridge was good for Hudson because you didn't have to pay hardly any taxes here because of what they collected off the toll bridge. That toll bridge was still there when I started to work. After I graduated from school, and then I went down to business school. I was working in St. Paul, and that toll bridge was still there then. Highway 12 went right to Hudson, came down Vine Street and turned on the corner of Vine Street and went down 2nd Street and then turned on, it did too, go down Walnut.
Okay, and then out to the toll bridge.
Yeah, and climbed up to the toll booth.
And it was up. I didn't know it was up.
Yeah, it went up like this to the toll booth. And
okay.
Climbed up a little bit more on the other side. And then there was a two-lane highway going into St. Paul. One of the reasons my brother got killed because it was just a two-lane highway, and it was much more dangerous than it is now. Of course, the traffic wasn't as heavy. But by the time they did away with the toll bridge, of course, traffic was getting heavier because everybody was having cars by that time. So during the war, of course, you couldn't buy tires. You had to get permission to buy gas. So of course, it was harder to get around then. There was a lot more other transportation. You could take buses back and forth to St. Paul. Buses ran all the time, all over. And of course, the train went through Hudson, and you could take the train.
Into St. Paul from here?
Oh yes.
Okay.
Of course, the trains went to Chicago, but except for a few of the express trains, they stopped at Hudson. So you can. I remember there was a train that would leave around 7 o'clock in the morning that you could take over to St. Paul. So if you didn't have a ride or something, you could always catch a train, or you could catch a bus going over there. I rode with in a carpool, and of course, especially during the war, and during those years, people who drove carpools could get tires, and they got gas cards, and so they could keep their cars going back and forth. But if you didn't have those, if you didn't have a carpool, well, you couldn't get those things. During the war, there were a lot of things that were very scarce, and you never knew when they were going to take something off the market, so that you had to have
Was it ration cards?
Ration cards. Yeah, you had to have ration cards to get them. I can remember going shopping on a Saturday afternoon with a girlfriend of mine, and I saw a dress I wanted, and then I also wanted a pair of shoes, so I took the dress and didn't get the shoes, and that night they rationed shoes. So I couldn't get any. And of course they rationed meat too. And so you'd save your points, you'd save your ration points, and then you could buy a steak or something.
So how would you? So they rationed shoes.
Yeah,
so
they rationed shoes.
You couldn't buy shoes unless you had.
They allow you so many pair of shoes, so you had to use a ration card to buy shoes.
How did you get a ration card?
They issued them to you.
They issued them?
They were issued to people.
Okay. So you could only have a certain amount of ration cards for certain items?
Well, you could only buy a certain number of items. They had rations on sugar. They had rations on gas. They had rations on shoes. Some items you couldn't. Some items just didn't exist during the war. You couldn't even buy them in a. Some items of groceries you couldn't even buy during the war. They weren't available. Of course, with all the soldiers overseas and stuff, and that they had to provide for, some items there weren't enough for the civilians to have. They talk about stockings. Nylons, before that, they were nylons, were nylon stockings. Well, during the war, you couldn't buy nylons at all, because they used the material for something else. So, if you had nylons, and you got to run in them, you'd go to one of these places, some places that could fix them, could repair the nylons, pull the strands up so that they can repair the run. So you'd try to hang on to those. If you could, if you ran out of nylons, you'd go and buy rayon stockings. And rayon stockings not only looked heavy, but it'd take about a week for them to dry. And they were horrid. They were just terrible. Well, when the war was over, in the stores, the department stores and everything started getting stockings back in. The stores would send you cards and say, if you come in such and such a day, you can get a pair of nylons. So you go in on that day, and you'd stand there, be a whole line of people waiting to get their nylons. You'd get on the line, you'd present your card, and they'd give you could buy a pair of nylons. And boy, that was heaven, Yeah. That was heaven. Well, it was kind of hard during the war. It was a difficult time. World War II was a really difficult time. Of course, there were everybody you knew. I was right in the middle of that age, so of course, many people that you knew were overseas. And of course, the communications aren't what they are now, and some of these boys would be fighting in these faraway places, and you'd never know whatever happened to them. You hear about the battles, and if you didn't know if the person you knew it might be in that area was all right or not. It was really very hard. It was a very difficult time. It was a hard time to grow up. It was very difficult. Everybody's life was turned upside down. It wasn't a natural course of events at all. Everybody's lives were disrupted. One good thing, one good thing about it was that they had education benefits for the veterans afterwards. So if you wanted to, you could take advantage of them and get a college education when you came out. You'd have to pay for part of it yourself, but so many kids that I knew were able to go to college because of the veteran benefits. So that was one good thing. There were many bad things, but that was one good thing that gave all these kids a good start in life. Of course, then maybe you could get farther with the college education than you can now. I don't know. Not everybody had college education, so maybe it was a little more valuable. 2nd Street didn't used to be Highway 35. 3rd Street used to be Highway 35. And it crossed over the railroad tracks. 3rd Street, as you can see at the end of 3rd Street now where there's a bar across there, but that's where the road used to go, and there was a bridge across it. And then it circled around the hill and went down and went over to a bridge to North Hudson. 2nd Street, where I live, and it went flat, and all those houses up in the next block from me in the 1400 block on 2nd Street were all just everything was just level there, and then there was a barrier where the railroad tracks were, so you couldn't go any further.
Okay. Was that near Division Street?
It's Division and Pine Street. Yeah. Well, here's 3rd Street, Pine Street.
Okay.
Pine Street. Now here's where it crossed the railroad track. There's the railroad tracks. Here's where it crossed it. It went down here,
okay,
down here, and across over here.
Oh, so it crossed in the same spot.
Crossed in the same spot. But this was a hill. That's a hill here. And I remember there was a little shack down here where this man sold bait. Yeah, there's a bait shop there. There were some houses up here. There were 3 houses up here, right up here. But and then this it just circles around like that. But then this all stopped right at 2nd Street. Stopped right at the right here. Yeah, right at the railroad track. Right at the railroad tracks here. There was a barrier there. Once in a while, somebody goes through the barrier and got hit by a train or something, So then down here, Bridge Street, down here, there was a little dam here, and we used to go swimming in this little dam down here. And then the water went out one year, and you could see how deep it was. Boy, there were drop-offs in there.
Oh.
All the water went out of here one year.
Why did it go out of there?
Something about the dam here, I guess, or maybe it was during that real terrible drought of the 30s or something.
Okay.
Well, at any rate, the water went all out, and you could see there was no water in it at all, and you could see how the drop-offs in it and everything. And well, of course, we didn't go swimming here, and there were drop-offs there. But across from this little dam, and there's woods here.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, this was during the Depression, and people didn't have jobs, so they'd ride the rails. People just trying to find work. They'd ride the rails. And there was kind of a camp here where some of these people used to stand. They used to call it Hoover's Rest Camp.
Hoover's Rest Camp?
You know, President Hoover?
Yeah.
Hoover's Rest Camp. Then, when we were kids, these fellows would come up to your house and knock and ask if they could get something to eat. And we fed them. We'd feed them all the time. Now, these were just people who were down on their luck. They didn't have jobs. They were traveling around trying to find jobs. These people, you didn't worry about them. They never hurt you or anything. And we fed them all the time, and many times, only when my dad was home, he'd bring them in the house, and my mother would fix meals for them. You know, like they fix breakfast, eggs, bacon and eggs, and so on and so forth, and feed them, and then they'd start to tell the stories, and it was really, really interesting.
Do you remember some of the stories?
No, I don't remember the stories now, but I remember them talking about their homes and what they did and everything. And some of them, if my dad wasn't home, then my mother would pack lunches, and they'd take it, and they'd work for it if you wanted them to. We never had them do any work. We just give them some food. You feel sorry for them, but that was a common occurrence. We live, of course, pretty close to that. I live up over here. See, I live up over here, so we'd get a lot of these. So we'd get a lot of them coming to our homes. Poor people, you know, traveling all over the country trying to find a job, and they ride the rails.
Would you ever have a family show up, or would it be just men?
No, it was just men.
Okay.
It wouldn't work for women. I don't, you know. In fact, you know, that's dangerous. I'm sure a lot of them were injured or killed even, you know, trying to ride those rails.
Did they go to all the houses in the neighborhood?
Well, they just go to someplace until they could get something to eat. You know, they were just looking for food. It was really a tough time, really hard.
During the Depression?
Yeah, during the Depression it was. And you've got to remember, during that time there was no unemployment compensation, nothing. You were out. If you didn't have food, you could go to, I guess they had some soup kitchens that you could go to get fed sometimes. But it was a really difficult time.
Did they ever stay overnight at people's houses, or
No.
Okay, they just came for food.
They'd stay down at that's where these people came from. This Hoover's Rest Camp. They'd have, I suppose as they travel around the country, they'd form these places where they could stay together. I suppose that was true all over the United States, and they built bonfires down there, and of course, you know, then you have regular hobos too at that time, just plain hobos. I remember they used to talk about canned heat all the time. Hobos and canned heat. I don't know. It was some kind of alcohol or something, I guess. I don't know what it was.
It was called canned heat?
Canned heat. People ride the rails, and they have these camps established around different places by word of mouth or something, and they'd have some place where they could stay together safely, or, you know. This is probably the last of the 20s and the early 30s.
This is the end of our interview with Frances Birkmose of Hudson, Wisconsin. Thank you, Frances, for talking to me.
You're very welcome.